One of the things that I've learned from my clients is there's something called relationship emotions. And if you are able to master these 4 emotions, it really does transform your relationship and how you resolve conflict. So what are those 4 emotions? The whole point of fulfilling our needs is so that we can start experiencing the fulfillment of giving back to God, others. This is the real food. This is the food that we eat, and we don't wake up feeling like our soul is empty. I know having a spiritual practice is so important. I know connecting spiritually and emotionally and listening to my emotions is so important. And I know that physical exercise is so important. I know all these things. And so why am I not doing it? Why is this just not happening? It's like I'm just kind of just so frustrated with myself because I know that these things will really help me. One of the main reasons why we don't engage in that is because
acting on emotions as guides to truth. Stillness. Surrendering to what is. Seeking. Using my gifts with purpose. Light. This is the emotional blueprint.
Welcome to the Emotional Blueprint podcast. I am Corey Christensen, and I want to remind you that if this is your first time listening to the podcast, we have a website. It's theemotionalblueprint.com, and on the bottom, you can scroll to the bottom on the contact section, and if you have any questions, if there's any topics that you want us to talk more about, we love the involvement and the feedback. And so please let us know. So I want to talk a little bit about the impact that this podcast has had on me personally so far. We do retreats, and we're going to be doing a lot more retreats. And on these retreats, what's really special is that there is such a strong vulnerability and a vibe of acceptance and love, and people feel really comfortable being super vulnerable and super open and just speaking hardcore truths. And when people do that, especially collectively, whatever walls that you have up, it just kind of knocks those out, and you are in your spirit and you learn things about yourself that are difficult to learn when there's not that type of just bold vulnerability and truth being spoken. And so the impact that this podcast has had on me so far has been just really meaningful to me, because it's broken down walls for me that I didn't know I had, especially about like my own story. And it's helped me to realize some of the gifts that I have been given in some of these special moments in my story with my kids and my wife and my upbringing. And, to share one of those experiences is with my kids. And my youngest daughter, she's 2, and she was sitting on a rocking chair, cradling her little doll and rocking it. And my 5-year-old daughter came up to her and stomped on the ground towards her and put her hands on her hips and then ripped off my younger daughter's doll's head. And I'm sitting right there. And I think in my upbringing and how I was trained, I think the way I would normally respond to that would be like, are you serious? Like, what are you doing? Like, that's not okay. And regretfully, I have responded like that in the past with my own kids. And then what happens? My daughter feels shame and goes into the corner and literally puts her hands around her head and just is, deep in shame. And in this moment, I'm kind of have a moment of stillness, and I'm like, I'm going to try something different. And my oldest daughter's name is Gray, the one that instigated this conflict. And I said, Gray, come here. And in a calm voice, I just said, "Hey, what's up? How come you ripped the doll's head off?" And she didn't say anything. And I said, "Was it because you were wanting to sit on the chair?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Okay. So the only reason you ripped off the doll's head was just because you wanted to sit on that chair?" And she said, "Yep." I said, "Okay. Well, why don't we let Sage sit on there for a couple minutes and then you can take your turn?" And she said, "Okay, sounds good." And then after that, I say, "Hey, but there's a better way to do that. Come talk to mom or dad if, instead of just um, being aggressive." And she said, "Okay." So it just went so much better. So I'm very grateful for the guests and the co-hosts that have come on here. It's just brought so much more stillness and just broken down walls for me and helped me to become a lot more aware of who I am and how I interact with other people. It's the gift of when you're with someone and someone else is being very present, like Ernest and Kimberly and some of the guests we've had on here. Their presence, their spirit becomes a mirror for me to be able to see my own self. And that is the power of stillness and being really present with people. It's more powerful than words, that we can be a mirror for others so that they can see themselves and how they're acting or how they're treating us or what they're doing so they can see it, hopefully, So I want to talk a little bit more in detail about, we've been talking a lot about stillness on the podcast. We've been talking a lot about relationships. I want to talk a little bit about relationships. And one of the things that I've learned from my clients is there's something called relationship emotions. And if you are able to master these 4 emotions, it really does transform your relationship and how you resolve conflict. And so these 4 emotions, I think, are golden to understand a little bit better to really improve your relationship. So what are those 4 emotions? It's good to think of like a visual. I always kind of visualize trees in most cases in a lot of these examples. So the 4 emotions are anger, hurt, offended, and frustration. Kind of view anger as like the trunk of a tree, and that there's 3 roots underneath the anger: hurt, offended, or frustration. Okay. Why are these emotions important to master? The main reason why they're so important to listen to and to master is it helps you to know exactly what you're responsible for and what your partner is responsible for, if you understand and listen to these 4 emotions. Why is that so important to know what you're responsible for and your partner's? Well, remember, most conflict arises when we are trying to point the finger and get our partner or our friend to take responsibility for what we feel like is their part. And by understanding these emotions, it helps us have a lot of clarity to see things for the way that they really are. I love what Christ taught. He said, well, I'll just read part of it. He said, "Why are you trying to take out the dirt or the mote that is in your brother's eye, and you're not considering the beam that is in your own eye?" So just this visual of like, you have dirt in your eye and your partner or your friend has dirt in their eye. And while you have dirt in your eye, you can barely see, you can't really see. And you're trying to clean the dirt out of your partner's eye. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's going to get messy. You're going to end up causing more damage, maybe just causing more problems. And so what Christ said is, "Thou hypocrite, first cast the beam out of your own eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to take the mote out of your brother's eye." Okay, so taking responsibility first before we try to pin that on someone else. How can I begin to master each one of these emotions? Well, anytime you feel anger is a very real emotion, but wherever there's anger, there is always going to be one of these 3 emotions underneath it: either hurt, offended, or frustration. Okay, so anger is like an arrow trying to point you to one, or it could be, you could be feeling a couple of these, but there's usually one main emotion underneath the anger. So I want to ask this question before so we don't get lost in this. And that is, we're going to be talking more about these emotions for sure, and kind of helping you develop a mastery. What is it, kind of a flashcard perspective, or kind of a quick note perspective that I can have for each one of these emotions to at least help me to be better at recognizing them, and then listening to them. So anger. What's a flashcard reminder for anger? Anytime you feel angry, flashcard, there's either hurt, offended, or frustration underneath it. Okay, Corey, well, that's not very helpful, because it's only helpful if you know how to listen to the other emotions. So we're going to talk about that. But anger is always pointing to one of those three. I really like the visual of viewing anger like a fire. It is the actual flame, but it can't just start on its own. It needs like wood, or it needs friction to heat, and friction to emerge. Okay. So that's the same within us. For anger is like the fire. It needs heat or friction to arise within us. And there's nothing wrong with feeling anger. We just want to recognize it for what it is. Let's talk about hurt for a second. So hurt, offended, frustration. Okay, so what's kind of a quick flashcard reminder for hurt? First off, like, how can I tell if I'm feeling hurt? Hurt is the more severe, and it's specific to like betrayal, lying, cheating, and abuse. Those are like the big four. Let's say you ask your partner, like, hey, I want to spend some time with you on Friday night. Like, what are your plans? And they say, oh, I'm really busy. I have to work until midnight. If you then later find out, or they tell you that they got off at 9:00 and then hung out with somebody else, okay, there's a little bit of deception and betrayal to that. Like, that can be a little hurtful. Okay. So the flashcard reminder for hurt is, anytime we feel hurt, the flashcard reminder is something needs to change. What's happening is not good for me, and something needs to change. So when you feel hurt, that's what we want immediately to come to mind. Something needs to change. We recommend kind of going to your partner and asking if they're willing to change. But if not, then you're going to need to make a change. So for example, you could say, hey, this was hurtful that you blew me off and spend time with somebody else. I'm hoping that we can figure this out. If they don't take responsibility for that and try to be better and work on that, the hurt is basically telling you that you need to take a step back in some way, and whatever that looks like. Something needs to change. And imagine hurt emotionally is like touching the stove. It's like, ouch, I just touched the stove. Well, don't keep doing the same thing. Don't keep putting yourself in a position. There's a powerful saying that I think is very true. When somebody hurts us once or twice, it's on them. But any more than that, and it's kind of on us. Okay, so super important to listen to, because if we, like we've talked about on the podcast, if we don't listen to hurt, we begin to engage in self-betrayal, and we begin to witness the gradual approach of our own internal disintegration. Okay, this does not lead to a place of worth and value. Quite the opposite. Now, most people think they're feeling hurt in their relationships when they're actually feeling offended. And why does that matter? Well, because hurt is caused mostly by somebody else. But when we feel offended, that is mostly our responsibility. Okay, so there's a big difference between hurt and offended in our relationships. Okay, so how do I tell the difference then between, remember, hurt is specific to those four kind of big ones: abuse, lying, cheating, betrayal. If those aren't happening in your relationship, and you just feel really like bothered by someone, or just really like they're being so rude, or inconsiderate, um, that's most likely going to be offended. Okay. So what's the quick flashcard definition for offended? Well, anytime we feel offended, that's our body telling us, our spirit telling us that we are lacking in understanding. It doesn't mean they're not responsible for their behavior, but they're not responsible for the emotion of offended. Let's say my wife is being a little inconsiderate and I feel offended. She's responsible for being inconsiderate, and we can chat about that after I find my own understanding. So what that looks like is I'm going to take some time. I am going to take some personal time to reflect and ask myself the question, what do I need to understand so that I don't have to feel that way anymore? Quick flashcard reminder with offended. Okay, offended is I'm lacking understanding. But if someone is, why do people do things? Why are people inconsiderate? Why are people rude? Why are people, racist? Just these things like this. And racism can definitely fall under hurt as well. It's, it's a fine line. It can be either. But anyways, why do people act like that? I think a really important perspective is to view it is this person is in need of healing or perspective. They need some healing or understanding. Just like me, I need healing and understanding too. Just like me, I say inconsiderate things too. I also am in need of healing and understanding, and so are they. Okay, so quick flashcard reminder. I'm lacking in understanding. Anytime I feel offended, I can try to find this view. I have to remove myself to find this clarity, to find this view that this person is just in need of some healing or understanding. And there's a really powerful practice that I'm a big fan of when it comes to feeling offended. And that is kind of what I mentioned already. It's called the just like me practice. So going back to the example of maybe my wife saying something inconsiderate and then me feeling offended, if I want to let go of that negative emotion, I can practice the just like me practice. Kind of what I was talking about earlier is like, just like me, I say inconsiderate things sometime too. Just like me, she is in need of healing and understanding. And just like me, she loves me and doesn't mean to be rude. And just like me, we can forgive each other. Someone cuts me off on the freeway. I might feel offended by that. Just like me, this person is trying to get somewhere. Just like me, they sometimes rush and make mistakes. Just like me, they're not intentionally trying to ruin people's day. So in that one, I guess we don't know for sure, but finding the truth, it goes back to that kind of popular saying, the truth sets us free. And that's very much true for offended. We're trying to find the truth. We're trying to see the whole picture. And when we do that to some degree, the offended recognizes that and it's satisfied and it goes away. And once I've kind of taken time and resolved the offended, then I can return to my partner, not from a place of offended, but then I can say, hey, what's going on? You were a little inconsiderate. Like, is everything okay? Whatever. And then sometimes when we feel offended and we resolve it, we just don't need to bring it up. There's wisdom in not bringing everything up in the relationship. And I think that brings up a good question. How can I tell how much is right for me to bring up in my relationship? Like I've mentioned, most of this are things that our partner does that offends us. And what I would recommend is kind of keep track, not keep score, but keep a note of like, if you're taking time to resolve the feeling of offended, and okay, my wife is being a little inconsiderate, you can make a note of that and kind of make a note of other things that might come up in the week. And then when you do your once a week check-in with your partner, that's a great time to like look at your list and like, okay, what's the one or two most important things out of the 8 things that I came up, or the 8 things that I think we can work on? What's the most important? So there's wisdom in not bringing everything up. Because if I were to bring up all those 8 things, or my wife probably has 30 things for me every week, if she were to bring up all those, and this has happened to us before early in our marriage, then the relationship starts to it starts to turn into a lot of criticism. Like, hey, like, You keep leaving the dishes out. Hey, you're being pretty rude, just like you were yesterday. Hey, like, it just creates a blame environment and a critical environment, and then that really starts to erode the love and the positive feelings that we feel for our partner. So, and then the last emotion in this kind of in the relationship emotions is frustration. And frustration, what's also in the same family as frustration, is stress, irritation, just feeling overwhelmed. Those are basically all of the same emotions. Overwhelm's a little bit more intense, but all of those emotions mean the same thing. Same thing. So when we feel frustrated or stressed, the quick flashcard definition we want you to kind of memorize is, okay, there's some kind of personal imbalance that I'm experiencing. Okay. So example, I'm using a lot of examples about my wife today. But let's say me and my wife are driving, and there's something really important that I want to say to her, but she is on her phone. And so I start to tell her this important thing, but she's not listening or present because she's on her phone. If I don't recognize that and accept it for what it is, if I keep trying to talk to her and kind of share this important thing that's on my mind, then I am going to end up feeling frustrated. So am I feeling frustrated? Is she causing me that frustration? No, I am causing it because I'm not accepting what is. She wants to be on her phone right now, and that is totally okay. It is important what I have to say. We'll talk about it in 10 minutes or later on tonight or whatever. Okay. We can't force people to do what we want. When we try to do that, we create our own frustration. And then oftentimes people try to blame that on other people. Okay. So in Buddhism, this is the exact definition of what they refer to as swimming against the current. We need to go with the flow of the current of life and be understanding and accepting of where people are at. And we make our adjustments based on that. I'm not saying that we can't ask people to, work on something or to shift something or to be aware of something. Like, that's really valuable. But, we just got to be careful with that. Like we just talked about, if we bring it up too much, then it erodes any feelings of love in any relationship. So on our website, there's some diagrams of some of this stuff. So you can go to the emotionalblueprint.com and you can go to resources, digest, and then resources, and you can access these diagrams to kind of look at it and start to practice. It takes quite a bit of awareness and quite a bit of practice and time to master these. Not too long. And so if you have any other questions or thoughts on these, we'll be talking more about them and post some things on the contact page for sure. There's been a really strong buzz phrase that has been going on for, I think, a few years, maybe longer. And that is this buzz phrase of love yourself. I have no problem with that term, but when does loving yourself become the wrong thing to do? When does loving yourself turn into selfishness? It's when we misunderstand what the term self-love actually means. When we're talking about self-love, we're talking about making sure we are meeting our core fundamental needs. Because if we are not meeting our core fundamental needs, then it is going to negatively affect it's going to impact how much we have to give to others. Okay, so self-love is super important. But what are the basic needs? There's 3. There might be more, but there's 3 main ones that come to mind. Physical exercise, taking care of your body that way, emotionally checking in with yourself regularly, and then being serious about having meaningful spiritual rituals. And you can combine those in this really beautiful, like hour, maybe a little bit longer, hour and a half practice, bare minimum 30 minutes though. And so these are the core fundamental needs of every human being. Now, okay, so when does self-love turn into, when does that become the wrong thing to do? Well, if I believe that my needs are golfing for 5 hours every other day or a few times a week instead of, helping my partner clean the house or spend time with the kids or spend time in relate, like spending time giving to other people, then it's not like those things are wrong. But what we see happening is we see this great shift of people starting to believe that their needs are, for example, golfing for hours and hours and hours, or video games for hours and hours and hours, or, these don't fall into these base needs of like a little bit of exercise, emotionally checking in, and spiritual connection. I mean, I don't want to sound an absolutist. Sometimes they can, but why is there such a big shift of people becoming more selfish? Is basically what we're talking about, and using self-love and confusing that with actual selfishness. Well, selfishness at its core is a unconscious belief that my wants are more important than other people than other people's. What I want is way more important than what other people want, and that's just false. It's equal. So it's interesting on a deeper level. Why is this? Why is selfishness growing? Well, there's so many reasons. We've talked about it in some prior podcasts, but one of the interesting reasons that I've seen in some clients and collectively as I've meditated on this is an interesting combination that I see a lot is if somebody gets, for example, let's just say a man gets not enough love or connection with his father growing up, but almost gets too much over involvement from their mother. So it's this really confusing message because they're not feeling enough from their father, that father relationship, but then they're getting too much. So it creates this really confusing internal worth of seeing things where deep down they feel insecure and not enough, but then they're being told that they're a really important, special, the believe a special and more, and taking that to believe they're actually more important than other people. So this pursuit of self-love, if it's done in the wrong way, it's never going to, no matter how much they golf, no matter how much they love themselves, it's just not going to be enough. The most important thing that somebody could do, if this connects with you in any way, usually we're not aware of this when we're doing it, but one of the quickest practices that can help you begin to not only see this, but to start to fill that hole more is having a really meaningful spiritual practice. Listen to almost any of the prior podcasts, and they will break down and talk about how to do that. I think we pretty much talk about that in every single one. There's this really powerful story in the Bible that talks about this. It talks about a very hungry man that has no food, and he falls asleep, and he dreams of eating this feast. But when he wakes up, his soul is empty. What does that mean? It means that there's so much deception and counterfeit fulfillment in the world. Tying this back to what we're talking about, do I actually know what I need? Do I know how to actually fulfill what it is that I need? And am I willing to make the sacrifice to do that? We've highlighted a few things of what we need. And prior podcasts will break down specifically what that emotionally and spiritually looks like. But I want to talk about, why is it so difficult? Like, there's this, I think this is so relatable for me, to be honest. And because I still engage in this, what I'm about to say, and many other people, is like, I know having a spiritual practice is so important. I know connecting spiritually and emotionally and listening to my emotions is so important. And I know that physical exercise is so important. I know all these things. And so why am I not doing it? Why is this just not happening? It's like I'm just kind of just so frustrated with myself, because I know that these things will really help me. One of the main reasons why we don't engage in that is because if we do engage in that, it's often causing some kind of rift or discomfort in some other way. Okay, for example, one of my friends was opening up to me about how she knows she needs to have more personal time and do some of these things. And she's so frustrated that she's not doing them. But if she does, like, her husband is going to get mad at her. And he's a great guy. They're just used to this dynamic of her basically giving quite a bit in their relationship. And so she starts taking an hour every day. She already knows that her husband's going to be like a little miffed about that. So that's just a simple example. But okay, if I do start taking this time, like, what does that actually look like too? But it's one of those things where I start taking that time, and then it starts, other difficult emotions or discomfort starts coming up. And it's like, that's really good. That can begin to lead to this transformation. We don't want you to be afraid of this discomfort or anxiety or fear or anger, whatever it is that starts coming up for you. If you start being still and taking this time, that is the process of going toward your discomfort or your pain. And that is how we heal and progress. Okay. So I just want to validate that it's not as easy as it sounds. There's a real sacrifice here, and it oftentimes brings up other discomfort or thoughts, or, whatever, like, this is selfish of me. What am I, whatever it is. I think my encouragement is to try to find a starting point instead of focusing on trying to do all this stuff that I just mentioned. Just try to take some quiet time and journal and try to just notice and begin to be aware of the discomfort that is coming up for you just by taking that time. What negative feelings are coming up, what thoughts or beliefs are coming up. And that can be a starting point to start to work through that and be aware of that and process some of that. That could be good to talk more about too on this podcast. So self-love is a beautiful thing if we're actually interpreting it for what it is. Because you think about what love is. I am fulfilling what I need so I can have more love to give others. That is the whole purpose of healing and taking on this burden of becoming more whole, is so I can give more to others. So you can really evaluate, like, am I working on myself to allow myself to give more? Or am I just working on myself to allow myself to golf more? Nothing necessarily wrong with that, but there has to be a balance. Yeah, has to be a balance. I'm giving golf a bad rap, but like, golfing for 4 hours is not a need. That's a long time. Again, could it be one of those fulfilling things that you do, I don't know, once a week or whatever it is? Sure. But to call that a need is a good example of taking it maybe a little too far. I think this is, to wrap this whole self-love thing, kind of what's maybe a good evaluation for selfishness and developing more like selflessness. And I think meekness is a good word that we talked about on the last podcast. And this has been such a good reminder for me too. How often am I doing things for others that I don't want to do? How often am I intentionally doing things for others that I don't want to do? How often am I sacrificing time for other people that I love and care about. Basically, how often am I engaging in selflessness? So again, the whole point of fulfilling our needs is so that we can start experiencing the fulfillment of giving back to God, others. This is the real food. This is the food that we eat, and we don't wake up feeling like our soul is empty. We've all had this experience where we've really helped someone else and felt that kind of hit. There's just nothing quite like it. It lasts, even though we don't remember it, that feeling lasts forever. It's an eternal reward. I think this leads into another great topic, which is estrangement. So what is estrangement? It's one of the most difficult things that can happen. And estrangement is when we, out of necessity, have to cut someone out of our life, or somebody kind of cuts us out of their life. Most of us have experienced one of those or both of those. And estrangement is grieving the living. It's why divorce is often considered more traumatic than losing somebody to death. Well, how does that make sense? Well, it's because we're grieving the living. It's still the same loss with an element of rejection attached to it. So it's like getting stabbed with a knife and then it just getting twisted in there. Like it's very painful. I want to talk about both sides of it for a second, because both are very difficult. One of the common errors that I see people make is oftentimes they make too many exceptions for family. And I want to explain what I mean, because I'm definitely an advocate for holding on to relationships. So when is it necessary for us to temporarily, or hopefully not permanently, cut someone out of our life? There's two situations when it's necessary to do this. The first is if someone is actively hurting us. Remember, hurt, lying, cheating, abuse, betrayal. If someone is continuing to do that and they're not willing to change, then it is, remember, the message of hurt is crystal clear. What's happening is not good for me, and something needs to change. If that person is not willing to change, then I need to make the change. Now, I see these sad situations where many people that I've worked with are in abusive relationships, and it's family. And part of the thing that's getting them to hold on, it's like, this is my brother, or this is my spouse, or this is my mom, or this is my dad. Like, they're family. I can't just not talk to them anymore. And the hurt, remember, just as a reminder, these pain does not come from a random place. It comes from your spirit, which is a space of wholeness and truth that is directly connected with God or the universe. So just think of that line. Okay, we've got God or the universe, whatever you believe, our spirit is connected directly to that. God or the universe communicates through that. And then negative emotions come from that space of truth. Okay, so the hurt is going to say, hey, I know it's hard, but whether it's family or not family, the message is the same. What's happening is not good for you, and something needs to change. Making that change is heartbreaking. It's so difficult. I remember when I was in my 20s and I was starting to become aware of how my own mother has kind of had an impact on me. And I love my mom. She's amazing. But she had a significant impact on me in some negative ways that really affected my dating life and myself emotionally. But uh, there was so much beauty that I have gained from that, and I'm just so grateful for my mom. But as I was going through this process um, of understanding the impact, it was bringing up this pain. And although my mom was not actively causing it, it was the right thing for me just to take a temporary space, temporary breakaway. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. This is the second reason why it might be important to temporarily distance ourselves from somebody, is because when I'm actively around them, it's causing me triggers. It's bringing up my past pain. Like, this is why therapy is the busiest at the beginning of the year, because people go home for the holidays. All these, sadly, I've had this experience. All these triggers come up, and then they're like, I thought all that stuff was gone. I didn't know that was still there. And, they make an appointment in January or February or whatever. So I want to come back to the hurt, but just to finish this up, it's like, okay, remember, this is a bruise. How can we heal from a bruise if it is actively getting hit? In my case, I just needed a little bit of space from my mom so that I could kind of wrap my head around this past. And as I did that, and I went through the process of healing and letting go and forgiveness and really seeing and understanding my mom and all the gifts that I gained from that. I love my mom, and we have a relationship now, but I needed that temporary space. Okay. So those are the two reasons why, those are two things to consider on why it might be really important to temporarily or maybe even permanently estrange someone. How do I go about bringing that up? Well, we want to do it with gentleness and with truth. And in my situation, that looks something like, hey, Mom, I just want to let you know that I'm realizing some things about our relationship that I just need a little bit of time to work through before, we talk more, and it's not going to be very long, and I'm grateful for you. And, I'll reach out when I'm ready, something like that. Now, if someone is actively hurting us, this is technically not a healthy relationship. We don't necessarily need to communicate to them that we are out of there. We might need to a little bit, obviously. The concern I have about doing that at times is some people try again to get the person to understand, and this person is actively hurting you, which is usually indicative is they're not in a place where they can really understand you. Remember, they're in need of healing or understanding before they can be right for you. And you cannot change that. You've already tried. That's why you have been continuing to get hurt and hurt over and over again. And so it's so hard to do this alone, to leave a unhealthy relationship. I think every therapist has this experience of, to some degree, feeling frustration with people they really care about. And it's like, you need, therapists, I don't think should give advice like this, but you need to leave him. But in the back of our mind, it's like, that's what's going on. Like, I just want them to be free. I want them to have peace. But it's so difficult because it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. It's like, yes, they leave. It's like a trade-off. It's like, okay, I am trading off. I'm not going to get hurt anymore. But if I leave that, what waits me on the other path? A lot of loneliness and maybe guilt and sadness and just it's other pain. So people in this situation feel so stuck because it's like, I can either stay with him and continue to get hurt, which sucks, or I can leave him and go through this montage of other pain and anxiety and sadness, all this other pain. Oh, I do get it. It seems like it's easier to stay. And honestly, in many cases, it's temporarily easier to stay. But in the long run, we gradually disintegrate. Talks about in that A Hero with a Thousand Faces. I think I quote this every single podcast. That's just my favorite quote. He says, if you do this, if you do not listen to hurt, if you don't respond to the call, your flowering world becomes a wasteland of dry stones. Whatever house you build becomes a house of death. You just disintegrate. I've just seen that so many times. Please don't do that. Reach out to people that are in your corner that maybe they've tried to tell you to leave and they're really frustrated with you, but maybe, I don't know, try to find support. Try to just give it a day or two where you leave and you try to get your mindset. Try to be around people that love you and want the best for you. Try to seek that out. And sometimes we can borrow strength from others and find that courage to leave a really unhealthy situation. I just understand why why people don't leave. It's really hard, but I know that if you can find some support, if you can find some hope, maybe from some the podcasts in the past that we've done about feeling like there's somebody out there for you, God, that's gonna support you, that's gonna be there for you, that's gonna help you get through this other thorny path of leaving an unhealthy relationship. Joseph Campbell talks about what happens when we take that step on the other path of leaving a really unhealthy relationship. It's a beautiful message of hope. Again, I read this every podcast. I just want to share. This is what he says, what happens. This may not be immediate, but the protective power will begin to be ever present with you. The ageless guardians will appear. Whether you believe in angels or, the strength of the earth or mountains or whatever you believe, you'll start to feel a strength beyond your own as you take the courage to make the right choice. I promise that is true. I have felt that in my own life many times. I just to share one little nugget on that. I dated a lot in my 20s. It was a up and down, loss, love and loss and love. It was a roller coaster for 10 years. But I remember in my early 20s, I was engaged to this awesome girl. And I was working for her dad as well. And so I was very enmeshed in this world. And in one day, we broke up. We were engaged at the time. We broke up and I lost my job. And my world was shattered. And I did not know, I think I was probably 22, 23 probably at the time. I did not know then what I know now, but there was a very real strength. I had no idea how to deal with emotions when I was 22, 23. No idea, like most of us. I don't ever remember consciously thinking this, but I remember this experience of being in the basement, in my parents' basement, and just thinking about what had just happened. And something came to me and told me how important it was to just feel it, to just embrace the pain and just feel sad. And I don't know if I've ever broken down like I did that day. Again, I forgot about this experience, but as we're speaking truth and we're trying to learn together, our walls break down, and it's just such a beautiful promise. One only has to know and trust, and the ageless guardians will appear. If you respond to the call of your emotions or the spiritual call, the spirit or God or your emotions, it's all kind of connected. And you follow courageously as the consequences unfold. The hero finds all the forces of the unconscious at his side. Mother Nature herself supports the mighty task. It's just a beautiful promise that I have experienced. It is conditional, though. This usually involves pain being on the other path. And so you have to choose. You have to be in your room and choose to feel that. And then the support comes. In other words, what does it mean to respond to the call? It means to go toward emotion or pain, not run away from it. Remember, running away from it is refusing the call. And that's what leads to our disintegration. That's what leads us to stay in unhealthy situations. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what if somebody cuts us off? That's super painful. If we can be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves, are they justified in doing, are they cutting us off? Are they justified for doing that? Am I hurting them? Am I actively hurting them? If I am, then they're doing the right thing. And I need to take a really difficult look at myself and ask myself, what can I do so that I don't hurt others in the future? What can I learn from this? It's I have so much respect for people that can do that. It's a sacred question. Perhaps the most sacred question we could ask is, what can I do? What can I learn from this so that I don't hurt other people? What can I learn from this so that I can help others more? Those are just sacred questions. When people ask those type of questions in therapy, there's a very real kind of spirit of change or reverence to those that is really beautiful every single time. What if we take an honest look at the mirror? What if it's not justified? What if it's totally unfair and we don't agree with it? Then that's really difficult. That's going to bring on some sadness, and you have to lean into that and feel that. After feeling this loss and feeling this sadness, then we want you to ask yourself, okay, is there anything I can learn from this? And we want you to seek, obviously sadness specifically means a loss of hope. So we want you to seek some hope. And we've talked about that in prior podcasts quite a bit, in several. But the truth is, if somebody just totally unjustifiably does that, again, it's important for us to reflect and try to learn from it after we feel our pain, regardless of how responsible we are. There's always a surface lesson that we can learn, and then also a deeper lesson. Okay. Example, the guy that gets caught drinking and driving, the surface lesson is, okay, I shouldn't drink and drive anymore. But then the deeper lesson might be something like, I want to really understand what causes me to lose control and to not listen to others. Like, that's a beautiful, deeper opening that can lead to a transformation for somebody. It's the depth that leads to transformation. I think when somebody cuts us off and it's not justified, I think the two main emotions that are most likely going to come up are, you're going to be feeling offended by that and maybe even angry. And if we're talking about the offended, remember, it's what we talked about before. This is a beautiful time to realize this simple truth. Like, you know what? Finding this understanding of they're in need of healing and understanding. And that's why they're doing this. And finding a way to be okay with that is part of the sadness. We have to feel the loss, and then we have to seek that hope, which is turning toward something greater than ourselves and asking the question, the question, what question do I need to ask that if I got an answer to is really going to help me feel better? I'll share this. I shared this on one of the earlier podcasts. Another dating story. Well, there's one of my 20s are coming to my mind today, apparently. I think 30 or 31. I was dating this amazing girl, totally in love with her. She randomly breaks up with me, completely unexpectedly. We have a trip to Italy planned in a couple weeks. I'm walking up to my apartment and I just feel the weight of the sadness. And I know at this point what sadness means. Okay, I need to seek hope. For me, that looked like praying and asking the question, Am I going to marry this person? And are we still going to go to Italy? And I had one of the most powerful experiences in my life. I had this rush of peace and love come up and within me. And the words which emerged from that were, you're going to go to Italy with her and it's going to be amazing. And you guys are going to get married. And my deep sadness after I felt it and asked these questions and sought this spiritual wisdom turned into this beautiful hope. Hope is meant to replace sadness. Sadness literally means I'm experiencing a loss of hope. So we need hope to replace it, which is the truth about what we can't currently see. And so it's kind of it's a spiritual thing for all of us. I received this spiritual answer, and all I had to do is sit back and to watch and wait to see this answer that I got happen. We did end up going to Italy. We did end up getting married. We have 3 beautiful kids. So this stuff is very real, seeking hope. So from a loss like estrangement, and when somebody cuts us off, we need to find that hope, obviously, to be able to move forward.
If you have benefited from this podcast in any way, it would mean the world to us to have you subscribe, to allow us to keep it going and bring on inspirational human beings.